So, and then just more of like how she built up, because in my mind, there's no way that she could have this global business with that one factory. Okay.
No.
Like, she has to have had more. There had to be one in New York. There had to be one in all of these places, you know, and to really just talk about who she was. The fact that she just gave up on that deal and was like, you know what, I'm investing in people instead of this business. And her business still thrived. You know,
right.
She was like, you know what, let me just keep investing in the loyalty of my people instead of in this big company. So yes. Okay. So we have a question. Go ahead.
What's the question?
The question is, okay, so we're going to go with this first question. You see it? How can we combat colorism today?
I mean, that's how much time you got. That's
okay.
That's a question right there.
Like, This is a question. For my thought, like, that is the whole purpose of our organization, is to really erase the lines of colorism. There are some organizations that are doing great work trying to like really raise awareness about colorism. We are in the awareness phase right now. So we have tons of events speaking about colorism. We did an amazing event that will be coming out soon on video about preference and what that looks like, and if your preference is a bias. I think having conversations like that and having candid conversations, especially on a one-on-one or small group level, is something that like individuals can do. You should have seen the wheels turning in the men and the women of being like, whoa, maybe I am being colorist in my preference. Wait, I do realize that like back in the day, I only dated this type of woman, or I only dated a woman with like this type of hair. Like, whoa, let me check myself. So I think that once you explain that your preference could also be a bias, or like the things that you're thinking could be a detriment or could be something that is like a prejudiced way of thinking, people start to reevaluate the way that they're thinking. And that to me is one big way that anybody can combat colorism today, is really just having these hard conversations. As a people, we just haven't had them for so many years, because it's like, oh, no, that's not a thing. Like, we're fighting.
It's dirty laundry. It's dirty laundry that nobody wants to air. Yeah.
So what about you? How do you think?
So, I mean, I think you're spot on. The earlier stages, I think, definitely need to be about awareness, about having these honest conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable. Like, hey, why do I like this? Why do I want my kids to look this way? Why do, even just reflecting a little bit.
Yeah.
The second part, and something I talked about earlier, is kind of blowing the situation up. So taking it from the micro level to the macro level and thinking about, hey, a lot of people don't think about colorism as a systemic issue, but when you look at the data, when you look at the research, all the disparities that exist between white and black people, right? So income, education, wealth, exist to a lesser extent between dark-skinned black people and lighter-skinned black people. That's to say that it's a systemic issue. Preference is a part of it, and preference plays into the system. But then we see this play out in how people are moving through society. So when we start thinking about it in a way that's, okay, it's not just about having my feelings hurt or having or looking this way or that way, but it's also, hey, people who are darker skinned are getting less education, are suspended at higher rates in schools, so all these things. And when we think about it that way, and affecting people's livelihood and life chances, people start to maybe take more action or think about it in a more critical way. And I'll leave it at one more point. So in 2010, the U.S. government put together a committee to, I think it was called Erase, but it was to combat skin tone preferential treatment. So right. So because we saw the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission saw such a spike in colorism claims in the workforce that they had to put together something to check it out, to investigate. Now, unfortunately, oftentimes when these things go to court, they don't work out, right? So it's because even at the legal level, the issues of colorism are difficult to deal with. It's easier to say, hey, they discriminated against me because I'm black. That's easier to say than they discriminated against me because I'm dark skinned or light skinned. If it's within, if it's intra-racially. So it gets tricky, but I think, like Raven said, and then I'll stop talking. It deals with kind of having these honest conversations that are oftentimes uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. So let's think.
Thank
We
you
have a
for the
few more.
question.
Oh, we have a lot more questions. Okay, so how can we keep our storytellers in check, i.e.,
Ooh,
or example, Kenya Barris, while also advocating for Black stories in the mainstream media?
wow. So,
Again, go ahead, Edlin.
no, I'm mad that the person who said this escapes me, but it's something to the effect of when you're Black, you can't just do art for art's sake because you're a political subject, right?
Yeah,
So everything you put forth, is going to be interpreted in a way, and it's going to have meaning for different people. When you're
yeah,
not in an oppressed group, you can put out some art that doesn't really mean anything. That doesn't really
mm-hmm.
not that it doesn't mean anything, not in a disparaging way, but doesn't have kind of political consequences.
Yeah,
So when our stories are told incorrectly or told in a way that's less than truthful, it's going to have negative consequences. It's going to have
yeah.
it's not doing it justice. So how to keep them in check? Uh, Black Twitter does a good job oftentimes, but that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, I think it's about just calling them out. Like you said, Black Twitter can call out people with a quickness. I think it's about getting enough people to actually say that there's an issue. Because I brought up in the preference talk about how like these Black women storytellers were showing and depicting these like darker skinned women as all cheaters on a number of shows.
Mm-hmm.
And it was from like Mary Jane to Queen Sugar to Issa Rae to Annalise Keating on How to Get Away with Murder. And Cyrus brought up a good point. Like if there were 25 stories and these were just
Exactly.
like 4 or 5 of them, it would be fine. But because people aren't calling them out to be like, oh, this is not okay, that this is the narrative that keeps being fed out. And all of these are created by Black women. So it's not that
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, this white man created it and now he's making these Black women do this. Like Shonda
Right.
Rhimes in both of her like Black series, the Black woman was a cheater.
Not the quotes.
Like, cause
No, I hear
Scandal
you.
is not really like it is, but it ain't, you know what I'm saying?
No, I feel
Like,
you. I feel you.
and neither, like, it's not Grey's Anatomy. Like, Grey's Anatomy mainly got white people on it, but, this was like centered around Black women, whatever. But,
Mm-hmm.
those two shows that had like the main character were Black women, both of them were cheaters.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I don't, like, when can we get out of this narrative? So it's more people being aware of this, more people talking about it. When I brought it up, a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't make the connection. Because you're not thinking about the show on OWN, the show on BET, the show over here, and the show over here. You're just thinking about like, oh, okay, so these shows on ABC look like this, and this show looks like this, and not connecting all of the dots to be like, how are these all related? So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just about calling them out, even if it's just you, because you make other people start to think like, maybe there is something wrong with this. Maybe there is something wrong with that. Us as Black people, we are ride or die until you cross us. Okay. So we're like, oh, well, we just want to support the Black people. We just want to support them. Like, we don't have enough stuff, but for me, it's about supporting good things. Like, I'm going to watch the Tyler Perry movie to see if it's a little bit better. But then
Right.
we're going to call them out because they bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, no, Tyler Perry can do no wrong. It's about figuring out where your voice is best heard and just speaking out about it. Even if it's just your voice, it'll make people to start to think like, maybe this is not the best use of my time, or maybe this isn't a great depiction of us as a people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Well said.
see. Okay, so how do you both feel about the scene where she wanted to partner with Booker T. Washington, but he and his wife disregarded her?
So, that's a good question. So, Booker T is an interesting character, not only in the show, but kind of historically. So we know Booker T, right, born a slave. He was very much in this notion that people can just take these trades, these vocations, and they don't need to be doing the most, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times he gets a bad rap for how do I say this? For being okay with Black people taking kind of service sector jobs, because it's because those are respectable jobs, right? But he wasn't for the kind of this push for education like other folks were at the time. And even in my research, I know that in my research from Madam C.J. Walker, Booker T pushed back against her, not only because, I mean, she was shaking things up. So, right, Booker T did not want to shake things up. He wanted Black folks, get in where you fit in, and we'll make steady progress this way. Other folks are saying, no, higher education is the way to go, right? But here's Madam C.J. Walker, right? A Black woman, she's shaking things up, right? That, it could have went really bad. You know what I mean? When you shake things up like that. And the other aspect, and then I'll turn it over to you, is this notion that Booker T criticized Madam C.J. Walker for aspiring to like a white aesthetic. And I mean, I think that's debatable. There's certainly something to be said about that, but again, it's debatable. So how do I feel about it? I think Booker T was just living in a time where, one, women weren't doing those things, and two, Black people weren't doing those things, right?
Yeah.
And especially, so Black women especially weren't doing those things. So it's almost like, take it easy, I imagine that was some of the sentiment around that. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
I definitely think that as far as how they portrayed Booker T in the show, he was dismissive, I feel like, of both of them, because he kind of talked about Addie, but then he was like, oh, she's going to be selling these raffle tickets in the front. Like, she don't really, like, this is what she really going to be doing, to help with this other thing. Like, it wasn't really about her business. It was about her selling these raffle tickets in the front to help with this, the college. That's what she was doing. And then when it came to Madam C.J. Walker, I agree with Edlin, where it was just like, woman, know your place. Like, why are you not in there with my wife and them? Like, who cares about the frivolities of your hair and all this other stuff? Like, that's how I took it from him. If he was just like, I don't care about none of the stuff that you're talking about. Like, we're trying to do this and you doing too much. Like, why are you not in the kitchen? Like, it was very much of the times, which isn't right. But that's just, to me, it seemed as though, like, this is of the times. His wife, I felt as though Madam C.J. Walker kind of dismissed her first, because she wasn't thinking about what leverage do you have. She's like, I need to get to your husband. I don't care what you got going on. I don't care how can you help me get to your husband? And so to me, her reaction was just like, well, you don't need my help because you don't need me. You just need my husband. So I'm not in my husband's business. I got my own business going on. They ain't got nothing to do with him. And so when she kind of went off later on of like, we really need to get up, like, from up under our husband's thumbs. You guys all have business degrees, this, that, and the third. I think that lit a fire in them. But these women are college educated. And she said that. She's like, you guys have college degrees and you're someone's wife. Like, you're not doing anything. Like, we need to be doing more. So I think that maybe, Booker T's wife in the beginning felt like she was being dismissed before she dismissed Madam C.J. Walker, because she didn't want to talk. She didn't care nothing about the parlor. She didn't want to be in there. She didn't care nothing about that. She was like, how do I get to your husband? I don't care nothing about what y'all got going on. This cute, but the big dog is your husband. And then when it dawned on her that, like, she really should have been talking to them because they're who funded her business, she was like, oh, well, then y'all come on in. Like, thank you. Right. Come on into the house. So I think there was a dismissal on both parts for that situation between her and the wife. And let's see. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know whose question. Oh, here it is. Wait, I gotta read this fully. Sorry, y'all. Got my glasses on. What do you see as the major similarities and differences between how hair is discussed in the series and contemporary discourse? And sorry, it cuts you off. If you could just put in the rest of it and something.
Probably contemporary discourse. So that, I mean, that's a good question. That's a good question.
For me, I think that it definitely showed us in a different light. Like, especially for the times, like, I thought that the hair was phenomenally done. Okay? Like, every person, every extra, nobody had the same hairstyle. Nobody, like, there was no laziness when it came to that hair department. Okay. I don't know how many people they had on set, but they had a lot because they had a lot of work to do. Like, it wasn't just a regular, like, bouffant. They had braids, they had twists, they had a little twirl at the top. They had 2, 3, 4, 5 braids going. Like, the hair was phenomenal. I think that it definitely showed an expression of the times and self-expression that possibly not every Black woman had back then, to do these things. Like, I felt like it was very much like, you do this or you do that, and that's about it. And there were probably a few Black women who had the luxury of being like, I can switch it up, I can add in this braid, but for the most part, they probably just had to do something that was functional, minus like a Sunday or something like that they could wear as they were washing clothes, washing dishes, cleaning someone's house, and then having to go home and take care of their own children. Right. Today, I think that I would love to see those styles today. First of all, I'm like, because look, I'm trying to get a bouffant with the braid and the swoop and all of these things.
Not the swoop.
Look, but I think today we're definitely more self-expressive. Like, it's very individualistic about people's hair. You can have, whether you have a weave or you have natural hair, it can be pink, it can be blue, it can be blonde, and anywhere in between for both spectrums. You know, like, I see a lot of natural hair people who dye their hair all the time, and I see the other woman who has on 15 different wigs in 1 week, you know? So, like, I think it's more about self-expression now than anything. Sadly, we have come to the point where we need to have a law to be able to wear our hair the way that it grows out of our head, and not be penalized or fired for that. Like, to me, I think the law is ridiculous because it doesn't make any sense that we need a law to live our regular life. Like, right. Just be nice.
No, it's wild.
Decent people. So I definitely think that the times today is very much like indicative of the 2020s and the expression that people have today, just like it was in the 80s, just like it was in the 90s. Like, the self-expression is there. We're now embracing our natural hair again. Madam CJ Walker wanted me to do a blowout and pin it up and do all of those things, because I was like, this is fabulous. I'm trying to do that too.
No, I think you're right. I think I think we are in a position in society today where people can have a little more liberty with their hair, and I say little because right, we have the legislation. But I think something I wanted to talk about with regards to this question is thinking about, for example, even when Madam C.J. Walker's husband made the Walker girl, right, who was essentially this mixed looking woman with this 3B hair, right, as the ideal Black woman. I think the conversation around natural hair today is still centered around this 3B, 3A kind of looser curl pattern. So even when we have these natural hair movements today that are seemingly progressive on one hand, right, because now women can come out with all types of hair, we have legislation backing it, and Curly Friends and all these types of organizations, there's still an inclination to lean or to desire a 3B, 3A type of curl pattern, right? And that speaks to, I think, the continuity of the desiring the mixed race looking person, or the person that has these features that that are okay on Black people, right? We don't want we don't want the 4C hair. We don't want the very dark skin. We want the acceptable, the palatable Black people, and that's you know, and that's the power of white supremacy that has endured, you know, this, you know, several hundred years and continuing strong. So I mean, that's a great question, but it's a tough one to kind of to tackle at one time. But.
Yeah, it made me think when you were talking about that. I remember watching a YouTube person, and they had like a coarser hair texture, but they were light skinned, but they had a coarser hair texture. And she was like, my videos don't do as well as someone who has a looser curl pattern. Absolutely. She's like, someone can literally post, like this could be their first video of like, oh, it's my wash and go. And they can get 1 million views. And she's over here. Like she had a big following, but she's like, my videos aren't going to get as many views as theirs do. Absolutely. Because people are watching and being like, oh, so how to get my hair like this? Like, that's not going to happen. Like she said in the thing, they know it's not going to happen, but that's something they aspire to be. So they watch the video like, oh, like this is amazing, knowing that your hair is not.
So you have like that whole social media campaigns and folks who are and who are not getting followings, but even the products that are being made. I saw someone comment on here that Tracy Ellis Ross's line. I'm not sure what it's called. I can't remember what it's called. Pattern.
It's called Pattern.
There's another one that it came up during my thesis research called Mixed Chicks as a hairline product, and it's like, what kind of message are we sending that we're gonna target Black people with this product that's called Mixed Chicks, right? So, you know, definitely strides have been made, but certainly a long way to go if you know, we're gonna reach racial equity.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so I think we have time for one more because I think it cuts us off at an hour. Let me see. So, okay, so that was that one. Let me do this one that was 8 minutes ago. It says, do you feel like the movie was more focused on the entertainment factor other than the fact checking her life and sharing facts of her life? Go ahead. I'm gonna let you answer first.
Do I feel like entertainment factor? Yeah, I mean, it definitely appeared that way. I think they did a little bit of homework, like we said. There were some things that were generally accurate. The timeline was generally accurate. Some of the historical figures she was in contact, Booker T, Du Bois. So I mean, there was something in there, and there were every now and then they had these really cheesy monologues where, you know, the person would almost turn to the camera and say, at this time, this and this was happening in society. So, you know, I think they did try to give a little education here, but I would definitely say it was certainly more for entertainment purposes, for sure.
I agree wholeheartedly that, like I said, if you want to watch something that is drama filled, okay, and you want to have a good old time watching it, definitely watch it. Like I said, it's a beautifully done series. It's just not super historically accurate. Let's see if we can answer this. Okay. Oh my gosh. Guys, we have like 2 more minutes. Okay, so we have a question. How can women with lighter skin and looser curls be better allies?
That's a great question.
I feel like we just need to get on here and have a Q&A one day.
No, I really think that's a great question.
Go ahead.
You want to go first?
Okay, I can go first.
Think about that one.
I think for me, it's just owning, like, a lot of my light-skinned friends that own their privilege. I think that's the biggest thing, of owning and saying, like, yes, this is a thing. Yes, there is a privilege to look like me, to have the hair texture that I have, and not act like it's not a thing. It's just like when, you know, white people do it. Like, it's the same exact thing. Like, really own it, understand that, like, yes, I do have a privilege to look the way that I do. I think it's also just hyping up your, like, if you're a YouTube person and you have this looser hair texture, you know, hype up the person who has the 4C hair texture. Like, y'all like my videos, y'all really gonna like hers, you know. Like, really taking your privilege and using it to hype up others who may not have the same privilege that you have. And that's the biggest thing for me, is just like spreading that around and like letting people know, like, hey, I'm great, but she's also great. If you are in the workforce or whatever, like, having people, especially if you are a decision maker of what your company's advertising looks like, making sure that you have a diverse representation of what a Black woman looks like, and not just this ethnically ambiguous woman of just being
Right.
like, okay, she's our Black person, she could be Latina, she could be this, like she's just all of those things. And we will have a Q&A. So just ask for that. So we will come back with a Q&A. But really just like pushing for all types of Black beauty, and not just this like more European standard of what Black beauty is supposed to look like. I think that's the biggest way to be allies. Really calling out colorist behavior. I know that like I have some light-skinned friends that are like, oh my gosh, like, you know, if a dude says like, oh, you look so exotic.
What you mean?
Blank stare. Like
right.
This is the way that you can be allies, like letting people know the way that they are thinking, even if it is praising you, is not okay. It's not correct. It's not the right way to think. Let me see if Edlin can join back. Sorry, we got cut off because Instagram only allows you to have an hour. Okay. They're not here for the 2 hours conversation. Let's see if Edlin joins back for this last little quick. Sorry, guys. We'll just wait for Edlin to join back.
I'm back.
Okay. So I don't have someone else put a question in. I don't have it. If you join back on the live, please just put the question back in there. But so those are the two ways that I think that you can definitely be an ally, is to, you know, advocate for all types of Black beauty, and then to also just call out colorist behavior, even if it is praising you, to say like, that's not okay.
Yeah. I think the other part, you know, and I think Raven's absolutely right. The other thing I was thinking, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I'm thinking about where, and I don't mean being an ally, but hear me out. If you, and this is a kind of a historical thing that has been the case, where you see light-skinned people being the face of movements, right? So I would argue, and other folks would argue, I think, that we are in a kind of a Black aesthetic movement where melanin popping is in, where you know, natural hairstyles are coming in.
Yeah.
And the face of these movements maybe shouldn't be the light-skinned people with the 3A hair, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you can be a part of the movement, but to be the face of the movement also has a certain type of message and connotation. So I think there's a way where you can be an ally, but from the background. You don't have to be the face of the natural hair movement. If you know that you're using your privilege to be in this position, maybe kind of, you know, hand the baton to somebody else that can do the work just as well as you. And it also that it is also representing a different aspect that's not already being praised. So, and it's complicated, because you definitely want people to of all shades and complexions and textures to be unified, but we also have to realize that there are actual privileges of looking one way or another. So, I think Raven's absolutely right with that.
Perfect. Well, I just wanted to come on so we could finish answering that question real quick. We are done with our time, guys. Okay, like it has been over an hour at this point. Edlin and I will get together and figure out when we're gonna do this Q&A, because clearly you guys want it, so it will happen.
And you know what? And maybe we'll do we'll find another show, and kind of do the same. Maybe
I think that's a good idea.
We'll have to have a little conference call to figure it out.
We have, so drop in like under one of our pictures any suggestions you guys have about more lives. We're going to get together and come up with some more content, since we are in the house for the foreseeable future. Okay. And make sure that we're having this conversation, that is staying in the forefront of our minds, even if we can't have it in person. We're doing it virtually. As you know, I am in New York. Edlin is in Florida, so we are making it happen. And as soon as the quarantine is lifted, we'll be having our first event, because sis is ready to get out this house. So we will be making sure to have our first event, and we will keep you updated about that. We're going to have more conversations about preference and colorism. We're going to have some more kind of conversations around this. Let me know. I've been kind of toying with the idea. I haven't told you yet, Edlin, of doing a Netflix party around maybe something, one of these movies or whatnot. So let me know if you guys would be interested in that, of doing a Netflix party around something. Queen and Slim. Okay, this one of the suggestions, Queen and Slim, to do a conversation about that. Another beautiful film. Okay.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Beautiful film. So until next time, guys, thank you so much. Edlin, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Edlin Veras, on Instagram, obviously on EV400, and you can Google my some of my work that I've done on
you
on
can Google
colorism.
him, okay?
And yeah, thank you all for watching, for commenting, and I can't wait till next time.
Yes, and you can find me here or on my personal Instagram at _Raven Roberts. You can find us here on Twitter at OwnYourIam, or on our website, ownyouriam.org. Be sure to go on there, share your story. We're really trying to get other people's colorism stories and put those out there. It's just a quick questionnaire to really just talk about your experiences with colorism, your history with colorism, and what you think can be done to combat colorism today. We also have a line of t-shirts. I'm working on sweatshirts that have our logo, and then it has your I am on the back, so you can check those out on our website. So yes, until next time, guys, we will be doing this very soon because you guys want the information, and probably the next one will be a Q&A, and then we'll think of a show that we're going to do for the one after that. But thanks for joining, guys. Have an amazing day. Please stay safe, wash your hands, and only go out for essential needs.
Wash your hands.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.